former presidential candidate and author of the brand new book, Trust. Pete, it is great to see you. Thanks for coming on the show today.
Same here. Thanks for having me on.
So, this whole segment is talking about what's happening with the Supreme Court and the nomination of Judge Amy Coney Barrett. Since I've got you sitting here, tell me your views about this nomination and your views on this particular nominee.
Well, of course, like most Americans, I believe that the winner of this presidential election ought to make the decision about who's going to fill this seat. And by the way, we're not talking about an election day coming up. We're talking about an election underway. Millions of Americans have already voted, and those votes ought to be part of the decision-making process here. So there's a process question, but more importantly, there's a substance question. There's a question about our rights. The bottom line is my family, my marriage, this household that I live in, legally exists by the grace of a single vote on the U.S. Supreme Court. And I think about what it would have been like if that single vote had been a Justice Barrett instead of a Justice Ginsburg. I literally might not be a married man right now. So, this is not some academic concern or some arcane question. This is about our lives in a very immediate sense. And this is nothing personal about the appointee. This is about the philosophy, the ideology that is driving these appointments, driven by a far right that is out of step with the American people on issue after issue, whether it's LGBTQ rights and marriage equality, or whether it's healthcare, which is also very much on the line right now as this decision, this ACA case approaches the Supreme Court, perhaps voting rights and other questions. The decisions they make in that building, they come down into our most intimate dimensions of life. And that's what's at stake for me right now. It's not about her. It's about the decisions that are going to be made.
As you say, it is about our lives. I was reminded of the tweet that your husband, Chasten Buttigieg, sent out, where the tweet says, staring at this wedding ring, thinking of what SCOTUS means to our lives, our families, our marriages, our rights. I need you to vote. We all need you to vote. Mayor Pete, and I still call you Mayor Pete, even though you are no longer mayor of South Bend, Indiana. As I noted at the start in the introduction of this segment, that today is National Coming Out Day. As an openly gay man, openly gay married man, for those folks who are LGBT and especially Q who might be watching, what would you tell them if they are struggling with coming out and how to do it?
The most important thing I want them to hear is I'm rooting for you. I know that this can be incredibly challenging, and for different people in different ways. Some people have the sense of who they are and the readiness and the willingness to come out when they're teenagers. I was a grown man, a mayor of a city in a position of responsibility. I owned a house, and I found it extremely challenging to come out. In my 30s, some people are seniors and know that they're at a moment in their lives when it's just time. You're ready when you're ready, and I can't promise that it will always be easy. But I can promise that there is an extraordinary community of people who care about you and who support you as you're going through this process. And when you are ready, I will be one who will be there to welcome you and to urge you to stand up and be proud. And the other thing that I think is important for people to think about, because you're often understandably wrapped up in your own fears and concerns, is to remember that when you make a decision to come out, to be who you are, to let others know who you are, someone you might not even realize might be looking to you, might be looking up to you, and might know that they have a better chance of acceptance from seeing you live into who you really are.
Mayor Pete, that's so moving what you have to say to people who might be struggling with whether and how to come out. As you were speaking, I was handed, this is just in, Amy Coney Barrett's opening statement tomorrow has been released. And I want to read to you one part of that statement where she writes, "When I write an opinion resolving a case, I read every word from the perspective of the losing party. I ask myself, how would I view the decision if one of my children was the party I was ruling against? Even though I would not like the result, would I understand that the decision was fairly reasoned and grounded in the law?" Mayor Pete, what do you make of that?
Fairly reasoned and grounded in the law. Well, two of her would-be colleagues, Justice Alito and Justice Thomas, wrote a memo last week essentially putting marriage equality back on the table in their minds. So if she really wants to understand the party she might rule against, I guess I would invite her to follow that process and put herself in the shoes of somebody who was married and then was effectively forcibly divorced by judicial fiat, told that they were no longer married to their spouse, told that their family was no longer a family because of the ideological commitments of people wearing black robes on that bench. Would we be able to think of that as fairly reasoned? Maybe she would. I don't think I would. And I guess I would just hold her to that, if she's going to be a part of the majority, stripping away a right to choose, a right to vote, a right to get health care, and maybe even a right to be married from people whose well-being and whose lives depend on her interpretation of judicial philosophy.
And I want to read one more section from her opening statement. In this, she says, "Courts have a vital responsibility to enforce the rule of law, which is critical to a free society. But courts are not designed to solve every problem or right every wrong in our public life. The policy decisions and value judgments of government must be made by the political branches elected by and accountable to the people. The public should not expect courts to do so, and courts should not try." Just reading that, Pete, that troubles me beyond words. Your reaction?
Yeah, I mean, look, this is what nominees do. They write the most seemingly unobjectionable, dry stuff. But really what I see in there is a pathway to judicial activism cloaked in judicial humility. At the end of the day, rights in this country have been expanded because courts have understood what the true meaning of the letter of the law and the spirit of the Constitution is. And that is not about time traveling yourself back to the 18th century and subjecting yourself to the same prejudices and limitations as the people who write these words. The Constitution is a living document because the English language is a living language. And you need to have some readiness to understand that in order to serve on the court in a way that's actually going to make life better. It was actually Thomas Jefferson himself who said that we might as well ask a man to still wear the coat which fitted him when he was a boy as expect future generations to live under what he called the regime of their barbarous ancestors. So even the founders that these kind of dead hand originalists claim fidelity to understood better than their ideological descendants, today's judicial so-called conservatives, the importance of keeping with the times. And we deserve judges and justices who understand that.
Pete, I can't let you go without talking about your book, Trust. Why did you write it, and why do you feel it's important to get this out now?
Well, I thought it was important for this book to start some conversations before Election Day, because we really are in a trust emergency in the United States. We have a threefold crisis of trust. Trust among the people in our institutions and our government, trust among American people in one another, and trust around the world in America itself. All of these can be measured, and all of these have plummeted. The problem is the crises that we're facing, the challenges that are going to decide how the 2020s go and really decide how the rest of the century goes for us, are challenges that can't be solved without a high degree of cooperation. We're living through one right now. We're not going to deal with this pandemic without cooperation. Science alone can't do it without a human factor too. Science can tell us that we ought to wear a mask, but we have to decide to actually do it. Science can develop a vaccine, but we have to have enough trust in the process to be willing to actually get it. And by the way, I'd be the first in line to get a safe and effective vaccine for COVID-19. And what's true for the pandemic is also true for things like climate change and even just coming together to invest in better infrastructure and education and health and the things we're going to need as a country. The challenges require cooperation. Cooperation requires trust. And so we've got to build up our sources of trust and make our institutions more trustworthy so that people don't wonder when they're deciding whether to vote or whether to participate, whether their voice will even be heard.
Pete Buttigieg, from one gay married man to another, happy National Coming Out Day. My best to your better half.
Thank you. Likewise.